After my own daughter left me behind those locked doors, I realized something painful and clear. I wasn't old. I wasn't weak. I was just in the way. That's when I knew my life wasn't ending. It was being taken from me. My name is George, I'm 68 years old, and this is not a story I ever thought I'd have to tell. Before I begin, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. If this story touches you, leave a comment with your city or country. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, share your experience below. You're not alone. I spent my entire life building something for my family. Not just money. Not just a house. But stability. Safety. A future. I worked 6 days a week for over 40 years. Missed vacations. Missed birthdays. Missed sleep. All so my daughter would never have to struggle the way I did. Her mother passed away when she was still young. From that day on, I became everything. Father, provider, protector. I never remarried. I never complained. I told myself, as long as she's okay, I'm okay. And for a long time, that felt true. As I got older, my body slowed down, but my mind stayed sharp. I still paid my bills. I still cooked my meals. I still drove myself to appointments. But suddenly, my daughter started visiting more often. At first, I thought it was love. She brought groceries. She asked questions about my finances. She offered to help with paperwork. "You've done enough, Dad," she'd say. "Let me take care of things now." Those words felt comforting, reassuring. I didn't see the warning signs. She began insisting I was forgetting things. That I repeated stories. That I wasn't safe living alone. I laughed it off. But she didn't. She started speaking to doctors without me in the room. She spoke to lawyers. Just in case. She told neighbors I wasn't doing well. And then one morning, she picked me up and said we were going for a short drive. We didn't go to lunch. We didn't go to the park. She drove me to a nursing home. I still remember the smell. Disinfectant and silence. She smiled the entire time. "Just for a few weeks," she said. "Until we make sure you're okay." I trusted her. I signed papers I didn't fully understand. She told me it was temporary. That it was for my own good. That night, when the door locked behind her, something inside me broke. The room was small. One bed. One window. One chair. No photos. No memories. No dignity. I waited for her to come back the next day. She didn't. Days turned into weeks. Every time I asked about leaving, the staff said my daughter was handling it. Every time I called her, she said she was busy. Slowly, the truth began to sink in. She hadn't put me there to protect me. She put me there to remove me. While I sat in that room, she took control of my house. My accounts. My decisions. She sold my car. Changed the locks. Redirected my mail. I learned all of this from a nurse who felt sorry for me. She whispered, "Your daughter comes here a lot, just not to see you." That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and replayed every sacrifice I had ever made. Every time I chose her over myself. Every excuse I made for her behavior. And for the first time in my life, I felt something dangerous growing inside me. Not anger. Clarity. I realized something they never expect old men to realize. Age doesn't erase intelligence. Silence doesn't mean surrender. And a nursing home doesn't mean the end. It means privacy. It means time. It means people underestimate you. While everyone assumed I was confused, I started observing. Listening. Asking the right questions. I learned which staff talked too much. Which social workers actually cared. Which forms mattered. And slowly, quietly, I began remembering something my wife once told me. "Never give everything away, George. Always keep one door locked." I had. And my daughter didn't know it existed. Every night I sat on that narrow bed, staring at my hands. Hands that had built a life. Hands that had provided everything she owned. And I made a promise to myself. If she thought putting me in a nursing home made her powerful, she was about to learn how wrong she was. Because while she believed I was finished, I was just getting started. Every morning followed the same routine. Lights on. Pills handed out. Silence in the hallways. Voices lowered, like we were already gone. Most of the residents didn't ask questions. They had accepted their ending. I hadn't. I listened. I noticed who came to visit, and who didn't. I noticed how often families showed up during paperwork days. I noticed how some residents suddenly got transferred, and no one ever explained why. That's when I realized something important. This place wasn't just about care. It was about control. One afternoon, a social worker stopped by my room. Young. Polite. Clipboard in hand. "Your daughter is very concerned about you," she said gently. "She wants to make sure everything is handled properly." I almost laughed. Concerned people don't disappear. Concerned people don't change locks. She asked me simple questions. "Do you feel safe? Do you know where you are? Do you trust your daughter?" I answered carefully. Not because I was afraid, but because I was thinking. I realized something in that moment. If I reacted emotionally, I'd be labeled confused. If I argued, I'd be labeled difficult. So I smiled. "Yes," I said. "She's always taken good care of things." The social worker nodded, satisfied, and left. That night, I understood the game. They were watching me, testing me, waiting for me to slip. So I became exactly what they expected. Quiet, polite, cooperative. And while they underestimated me, I began to gather information. There was a man down the hall named Harold. 82. Sharp as a blade. Everyone thought he was senile because he talked slowly. He wasn't. One evening during dinner, he leaned over and whispered, "First time?" I nodded. "They all say it's temporary," he said. "Then the signatures start." That sentence stayed with me. Signatures. I asked the nurse the next day what paperwork my daughter had signed. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Legally, I was still competent. But my daughter had positioned herself as my decision-maker. In case. A dangerous phrase. That night I asked to see my file. They resisted at first. But legally, they couldn't refuse. When I read it, my stomach tightened. She had described me as forgetful, unstable, unable to manage finances. All lies. But written cleanly, professionally, convincingly. That's when the betrayal truly hit. This wasn't emotional. It was planned. She hadn't acted out of frustration. She had prepared. I sat there staring at those pages, and for a moment, I felt something close to heartbreak. Not because she had taken my freedom, but because she had done it without hesitation. Then something unexpected happened. A nurse named Clara started sitting with me in the evenings. She talked. I listened. She mentioned my daughter once. "She comes here often," Clara said. "But she never stays long." "Does she ask about me?" I asked. Clara paused. "No," she said quietly. "She asks about documents." That single word changed everything. Documents. I asked Clara a favor. Something small. Legal. Innocent. She helped me make a phone call. Not to my daughter. To my old lawyer. He hadn't heard from me in months. When I told him where I was, there was silence on the line. "George," he said slowly, "did you authorize any transfer of assets?" "No," I said. "And that's why I'm calling." He told me something that made my hands shake. My daughter had tried to access a trust. A trust she didn't know was incomplete. Because years ago, after my wife passed, I had listened to her advice. Never put everything in one place, she had said. I hadn't. There was a second layer. A safeguard. My lawyer told me it was still intact, untouched, and completely legal. For the first time since those doors closed behind me, I felt hope. Not loud hope. Quiet, controlled hope. I asked him to do nothing yet. No letters. No calls. Let me observe, I said. She thinks she's already won. The days passed. My daughter finally visited. She stood near the door, arms crossed, smiling politely. Didn't hug me. Didn't ask how I felt. You seem settled, she said. I nodded. She told me she was handling things. That the house was too much responsibility now. That she had made some adjustments. She spoke to me like I was already gone. And in that moment I saw her clearly. Not as my daughter, but as someone who believed power belonged to whoever acted first. Before she left, she said something that confirmed everything. Don't worry, Dad, she said softly. Everything you worked for is safe with me now. I watched her walk away, and I thought to myself, she has no idea what she just said. That night I didn't sleep. I planned. Not revenge fueled by anger, but correction, balance, truth. Because if she thought a nursing home erased my rights, she was wrong. It only gave me time. Time to think. Time to prepare. Time to let her make mistakes. And she was making plenty. Every document she touched. Every decision she rushed. Every assumption she made. She believed I was weak. She believed I was isolated. She believed the story was over. But it wasn't. Not even close. Because while she was busy taking what she thought was hers, I was quietly preparing to take back everything. That's something I learned the hard way. Once my daughter believed I was settled, quiet, and out of the way, she stopped being careful. She stopped pretending. And that's when the truth began to surface, not all at once, but in small, careless cracks. The staff treated me differently after her last visit. Not cruelly. Just distant. As if a decision had already been made somewhere above their heads. One afternoon, I overheard two administrators talking outside my door. She's pushing for an extended stay, one of them said. Is he declining? The other asked. No, the first replied. Not really. But she says it's inevitable. I sat on my bed, hands folded, staring at the wall. Inevitable. That word tells you everything about how people think once they believe you've lost your voice. From that day on, I became more deliberate. I asked fewer questions out loud and listened more closely. I paid attention to routines, schedules, names. I learned which social workers rotated in, and which ones stayed long enough to remember faces. One of them was named Daniel. Mid-30s. Divorced. Tired eyes. Still human. He came in one morning with a folder and said, "We need to update your care plan." I smiled politely and said, "Of course." He started reading statements aloud, prepared ones. "Your daughter has concerns about your financial judgment." I waited. "She believes you're vulnerable to outside influence." I waited. "She's requesting authority to make permanent decisions on your behalf." That's when I spoke. "Daniel," I said calmly, "do you believe that?" He hesitated. That hesitation was everything. "I believe," he said carefully, "that you're very composed." I nodded. "Then you should also believe I understand what permanent means." He closed the folder. That afternoon, Daniel came back alone. No clipboard. No script. He lowered his voice and said, "I can't give legal advice. But I can tell you this, once authority shifts, it's very hard to reverse." "I know," I said. "That's why I won't let it." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "If there's documentation that shows prior intent or safeguards, now would be the time." That night, I made another call. This time, to someone my daughter didn't even know existed. A woman named Elaine. She handled the secondary trust. The one my wife insisted on years ago. Elaine remembered me immediately. "George," she said, surprised. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." I told her everything. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said something that made me sit straighter. "She's moving fast," Elaine said. "Too fast. That's how mistakes happen." My daughter had assumed full control already. She had begun consolidating assets, restructuring accounts, even discussing future sales. But she couldn't touch the trust. Not without my consent. Not without triggering reviews. And she had already left a trail. Elaine explained it clearly, slowly. Every attempt my daughter made to bypass procedure created a record. Every rush signature, every assumption of authority without confirmation, it all added up. "She thinks you're incapable," Elaine said. "Which means she's not covering herself." I closed my eyes. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped. I felt positioned. Over the next week, I did nothing dramatic. That was the hardest part. I let my daughter continue. Let her rearrange. Let her believe. She visited again, confident this time. She talked about renovations. About downsizing. About what made sense going forward. She spoke as if I wasn't part of the future she was describing. I nodded. I asked one question. "Did you ever wonder why I never sold the old property?" She shrugged. "It wasn't practical." "No," I said softly. "It was intentional." She laughed it off. That laugh told me she didn't know. She left that day believing the last door had closed behind me. But she was wrong. Inside the nursing home, things began to shift. Daniel scheduled another evaluation, this one more thorough. Elaine initiated a quiet compliance review. My lawyer prepared documentation without sending a single letter. No confrontation. No warning. Just alignment. I remained calm through it all. When nurses asked how I was feeling, I said, "Clear." When staff asked if I missed home, I said, "I remember it." That distinction mattered. Then came the call. My daughter was furious. Not loud furious. Controlled furious. She asked why accounts were frozen pending review. Why documents were flagged. Why timelines had changed. I listened. And for the first time, I didn't explain. I simply said, "Because I'm still here." Silence. That silence was different. It wasn't dismissive. It was alarmed. She realized something had shifted, but not how, or how far. In the following days, her visits stopped again. But this time, it wasn't because she was busy. It was because she was thinking. And thinking people make slower, more careful moves. Too late. One afternoon, Daniel came into my room with a faint smile. "Your status has been updated," he said. "Indefinitely." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning no one can make permanent decisions without your direct involvement." I leaned back in my chair. Not victory. Momentum. That night, I stared out the window and thought about my wife. About the trust she insisted on. About the warnings she gave me. About how she said, "People show you who they are when they think you're no longer watching." My daughter had shown me. And now, the story was no longer moving in the direction she planned. She thought putting me away would erase me. Instead, it gave me clarity. It gave me leverage. And most importantly, it gave me time to let the truth catch up with her actions. Because the next step wouldn't happen quietly. The next step would change everything. My daughter hadn't visited, not because she was busy, but because she sensed something shifting beneath the surface. Something she couldn't control. Inside the nursing home, I felt alive in ways I hadn't in weeks. Every phone call, every form, every subtle legal move I orchestrated brought the momentum closer to the tipping point. I spent hours reviewing the trust and the secondary documents my wife had left behind. Every clause. Every contingency. Every line became ammunition. Not for revenge fueled by anger, but for truth and balance. One afternoon, a courier arrived with envelopes addressed to my daughter. I hadn't ordered them. She hadn't expected them. Inside were copies of financial statements, flagged errors, and missing signatures she had overlooked in her rush to consolidate. She had been sloppy, careless, overconfident. The next time she came to visit, she was sharp, smiling, trying to maintain authority. She didn't notice the subtle changes yet. The staff treated her politely, but they now responded first to me. That shift was invisible to her, but crucial. She sat down and started explaining her plans. "Dad, I've been reviewing the house, the accounts, the renovations." I listened carefully, nodded at intervals, kept my tone calm, collected. Then I asked one simple question. "Did you file the correct forms for the secondary trust?" Her smile faltered. Her hands froze on the armrest. What do you mean?" she asked, trying to regain composure. I handed her a copy of the flagged documents. All the errors. All the rushed signatures. Every bypass she attempted. She scanned them quickly, face paling. How did you?" I just smiled softly. "You underestimated me," I said. "And you rushed. You didn't follow procedure. And now..." I let the word hang in the air. Now, the system would correct itself. The legal safeguards would trigger. The mistakes she made underestimating me would cost her control. She stared at me for a long moment. Something broke in that look. Panic. Confusion. Realization. For the first time, she wasn't in charge. She wasn't calling the shots. She was watching, powerless. That evening, I spent hours planning my next steps. I knew confrontation wasn't necessary. The law, the trust, the procedures, they would do the work I couldn't do with anger or shouting. And slowly, quietly, they began. Her calls stopped. Her visits dwindled. Even her friends began noticing she wasn't as confident. Whispers traveled faster than she could manage. Her reputation within the financial and legal circles of our family's affairs was starting to falter. And then came the subtle first victory. One of the accounts she had tried to access without my consent was frozen automatically due to the safeguards in place. A quiet notification. A small beep. No dramatic confrontation. But it meant everything. She came rushing the next day, frustrated, demanding answers. I remained calm. "Everything is under review," I said. "It will take time." Her face twisted in anger. "You can't do this!" she shouted. I didn't answer immediately. I let the staff handle the forms. I let the legal letters arrive. I let the system do what it was designed to do. And slowly, the balance of power shifted. By the end of the week, she had lost access to multiple accounts she thought were hers. Her confidence faltered. She tried to manipulate, to reason, to charm. Nothing worked. And finally, I did something I hadn't done in years. I spoke directly, calmly, with authority. "You thought this house, these accounts, my life, were yours to control. You believed putting me in a nursing home erased me. It didn't. It gave me clarity. It gave me leverage. And it gave me patience." Her expression crumbled. The same child I had raised, the same one I had sacrificed everything for, finally realized she had miscalculated. That night I sat in my room, looking at the window, thinking of my wife. She had warned me about overconfidence. About blind trust. About people showing their true colors when they think you're powerless. I had waited. I had observed. I had allowed her to make mistakes. And now, the stage was set. The final act would come not from me, not from anger, not from shouting. It would come from truth, law, and the patience I had cultivated. And I knew the next confrontation would be the one that finally changed everything. The house. The accounts. The power. Everything she thought she had stolen from me. I was ready to reclaim. I received a call from my lawyer early in the morning. George, he said quietly, all documents are in place. You're ready. I hung up the phone and sat quietly for a moment. Years of careful planning. Years of patience. All leading to this single moment. Later that afternoon, my daughter arrived at the house, smiling as if nothing had changed. But I could see it in her eyes: doubt. Fear. The uncertainty of someone who thought they were untouchable. She started talking immediately, about accounts, renovations, and decisions she assumed were hers to make. I listened patiently. Every sentence she spoke, I let her fill with overconfidence. Then I handed her the first envelope. Inside were legal notices confirming her access had been revoked. Every account she had tried to claim without authorization was frozen. Every property she assumed she could control was now under the safeguard provisions I had left intact. Her smile vanished. She froze. What is this?" she stammered. I leaned back in my chair, calm, composed. "You should have listened," I said softly. "You should have followed procedure. You should have understood that putting me away would not erase me." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. Because deep down, she knew it was true. And finally, she understood the weight of every misstep she had made. The next envelopes followed. Statements. Legal confirmations. Audit results. Each one stripping away the false sense of control she had built in my absence. By the end of the afternoon, she sat across from me, pale, silent. The house that she thought she had conquered was mine. The accounts she assumed were hers were secured. And the life she believed she could dictate had slipped through her fingers. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I simply observed. Because revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience. It's about timing. It's about letting the consequences of someone's own actions teach the lesson. Later that evening, she tried one last manipulation. She begged. She offered apologies she hadn't felt. She promised cooperation she wouldn't honor. I nodded. "I've heard enough," I said calmly. "Actions have consequences. And your actions have already spoken louder than any apology ever could." She left that night, defeated but alive. And I realized something important. I didn't need to destroy her. I just needed to let the truth and law do it for me. I walked through the house slowly that night. Rooms filled with memories, laughter, and life I had built. Everything my daughter had tried to claim. Now fully restored. For the first time in months, I felt complete. Not triumphant. Not vengeful. Satisfied. Calm. Free. I thought about my wife. About the warnings she had given me. About the patience she had encouraged. I whispered to her memory. She would have been proud of this. Because the most powerful revenge isn't in shouting or rage. It's in being unshakable, patient, and wise enough to let others reveal their own mistakes. And in that silence, in that quiet victory, I finally felt at peace. No one could take that from me. No one could diminish it. And no one could ever make me doubt my own strength again.